thank you very much for being here today. I'm joined with Mathieu Fleury. He is the City Councillor for the Rideau-Vanier ward. Thank you very much for being with me today.
Thanks, James. Thanks for having me on, and thanks for thinking of me.
Yeah, no, you're one of the first people that I thought of, especially with everything going on. I thought it'd be really interesting to talk to the person who's working with my community the most. So I kind of wanted to just talk about that. So I guess to start off, you've been in Ottawa and Sandy Hill for quite a long time. That's where you grew up, correct?
Yeah, so I grew up about a block away from the Red Brick School on Osgood, known as Franco Jeunesse.
Mm-hmm.
I went to high school right near the General Hospital campus, and then came back to the University of Ottawa to do my bachelor and my master's in health sciences.
Mm-hmm. So you haven't ever been really far from Sandy Hill.
I always keeping a foot in my home community.
Yeah, that's so. How's it changed over the years? Like for me, I've only been in the community for about, I'd say, 4 years now. So I lived right behind FNS for a bit, and then now I'm living right down on the Somerset. So how have you seen it changed?
Well, you know what? I'm unfortunate, as you said. I've been in office now for the last 10 years. I was elected at the age of 24 in 2010, and I represent kind of the heart of the city, right? When you think about, obviously, Sandy Hill, Lower Town, including the Byward Market, and Vanier. When you think of a body, this is like the heart, right? It's really where everything happens. The universe, when I grew up in Sandy Hill, it was very different because we had more schools. For example, on Mannon Range, where now you have Uville for the young moms, high school for the young moms, that used to be a French Catholic school, and that had about 200 to 300 students, all living, or families living in Sandy Hill. The university was much smaller. When I started university in 2004. The university was around 25,000 students. Now it's at 43,000. So obviously the campus has not adapted to that growth, and a residential area like Sandy Hill felt it directly, right? The university didn't have enough on-campus accommodations, and Sandy Hill sort of felt the pressure of the growth of the university. We do have great schools, elementary schools that are continuing. We have a lot of embassies. Those that have been established and have been in place for many years. The Brazilian, Russian, I could go on and on. The Croatian embassy, and so on. I really see different parts to Sandy Hill. Right, there's kind of north of Laurier. North of Laurier, between Sandy Hill, between Rideau and Laurier, that's kind of a section. Then there's a section north of Somerset, south of Somerset, and then east of Chapel, right? So if you were to break down the community, you'd see different building envelopes, different.
It's a really eclectic neighborhood.
Yeah, and that's what's great, right? You have families, you have newcomers. We have one of the largest Ottawa community housing community in Sandy Hill, and people don't realize it. That's south of Man Street. It's called Strathcona Heights. And within that community, we have newcomers, we have seniors, we have 2 co-ops. So there's Sandy Hill, like you're describing, it's eclectic for the best and the worst of it. It's challenging at times, but certainly the majority of times people love the nature of everyone interacting.
Well, I love it. Like Safi's that just recently closed was a community grocery store. And we used to go there quite a bit. So they had a closing party, and obviously, we brought over some food to come share. And it was just amazing to see the community support. I didn't know how close-knit Sandy Hill was until I went there and the store was packed.
Yeah,
and,
Mo
to see how they impacted
appreciated
all these people.
Yeah, Mo was much appreciated. He sort of got caught by a landlord that didn't understand his importance, but I'm confident, seeing how much of a business mind and how much support he has in the community, that he'll reopen, just give him time and finding the right spot. But you're quite right that was sort of a hub of information, right? I see that a bit in other locations as well. I sort of see that at All Saints. They have the working tile patio now, and they have a cafe. That's a gathering spot. where the old Tan Cafe used to be on Wilbrod. That's now the Happy Goat. That's another kind of group of folks that hang out there. Even just outside of Sandy Hill, the old Rideau Tennis Club, that's now the Rideau Sports Center, sort of is another good spot for locals to hang out.
Yeah, and they have the new volleyball courts too. And
That's right.
even since I've been in Sandy Hill, I can just see the change going on, and it's only positive. And I love walking around, like, if we're just going someplace, because I usually travel by bike, and you can just see these new places popping up in Sandy Hill. And when you just look around, you just start to notice different things. And so that's what I love about the community.
Yeah, the small business community is quite it's quite locally focused, which is great. Obviously, Rideau Street is going through an entire change. I was along Rideau Street this morning, and what I saw is 5 cranes. So the face of Rideau Street is changing. That brings an amazing set of opportunities to bring in new commercial attractions. But it is a change. Mm-hmm. And then I mean the proximity and location of Sandy Hill as everything going forward, right? And we saw that with the opening of the light rail, not just in terms of access to transit, but the opening of the multi-use pathway that goes along light rail that basically gets you from the Ottawa Art Gallery or the Rideau Center down into the southern side of campus at Lee's.
Yeah, it's for me, it's extremely convenient. Like I've benefited immensely from having the O train open up. Talking about the changes on
challenges.
Yeah, there has been some challenges. I've had some professors that have. I think one of my service marketing profs, he was always out to get the O train. He wasn't a fan, but I personally have liked it, and I've never been very displaced by it.
Yeah, no, we'll have to take we take the challenges very seriously, and COVID has given kind of a second breath to the LRT, right? Where going in before COVID, people were really getting irritated with the service offering, but this is their chance. This is RTG's chance to regroup, so that when we get back into some form of normal, whenever that is, hopefully in September, then we could then we can see some reliability and gain in confidence. We'll knock on wood for that.
Yeah, hopefully. So you mentioned that Rideau Street's going through a lot of changes, and even walking down Rideau Street, I can see that as well. And even in the market, like I got the chance to walk in the market the other day, and I used to work on Clarence, so I was just walking down there, and that street is completely changing. So
yeah, I mean it has its own challenges there, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so
we're seeing part of the challenge is everyone aspires for a mixed area, and what's happened to the market, it is where it is. I state no opinion other than a lot of the businesses really focused on the summer tourism and the proximity to the university, which had become great amenities for tourists and students. But now that with the COVID situation, the 95% of classes in September are going to be offered online. So you're a great example of a local resident who will continue to support the local economy. But for businesses that only focus on those demographics, they're going to struggle to reopen, and that will change the market. There's also the reality of legalization of cannabis, which has been positive overall. But an area like the market, as soon as there's a vacancy, there's a business, the new business mind that says, well, we have to open a cannabis shop. We're already at 5. And, I certainly have no issues with cannabis shops, but I'm concerned over an over-concentration. I want to see, if you're a resident of Orleans, you should have your cannabis shop in Orleans. You shouldn't require to be coming downtown in the market for that. So, that's kind of an emerging issues now of some of the vacancies we've seen.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting point, because I remember I was looking at, I don't remember what building used to be there, but there was a middle one before COVID went down. And for some reason, I was looking at real estate in the market, just kind of looking at places, and they were only like the renter was only open to offers coming from cannabis sales, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, no, it's you're probably talking about the spot beside the old smoke shack or El Camino's. Yeah, I mean, we heard of that. There's 5 applications. There's 5 stores that will open this summer in the market. There's 2 that are opened. I, the landlord have a share of responsibility there, right? A lot of the landlords own a lot of properties, and
Mhm.
it's okay if generally they bring in one cannabis shop, but if they're all doing the same thing, then it adds a concentration. And there's no issues with cannabis shop per se, but it's the same way where if there was just coffee shops, people would say, well, can we get something other than coffee shops? If there was just pizza pizza shops, people would feel the same way. So, we need landlords to be creative. We need landlords to support mixed city for an area like the Byward Market so that everyone can enjoy it.
I totally agree, because I think, you know, the Byward has so much potential and it can be so great if there's a bit more diversity in what's offering in that area.
Yeah, I mean,
Because
you can go and have fun with friends at night, yet the next morning go and pick up a coffee, and for lunch pick up a sandwich, or you're in need of, I don't know, you're missing a couch to sit on. Well, great, there's EQ3 and other spots. So finding that mixity is super important, especially in an area like the market. And in the best and the worst of way, the growth of the university and the appetite for tourism has sort of driven one focus for some of the landlords.
Yeah, well, I like from working there, our biggest seasons was like I was hired for the summer, and the biggest days that I had to book off were Canada Day, race weekend. Like those
Yeah,
were the days where you had to be at work because that's what they thrived off of. And then winter
yeah,
is
for
kind of
sure.
the slow
And
time.
those days are great, right? Like I think generally that's what we want to see. One of my fondest memory of the market is in 2017. I was co-chair of the 2017 campaign and putting all of the events for the 150th. Obviously, as a capital city, we played an important role in that. And 2017 was unique, and La Machine, I don't know if you were around then, but basically the entire downtown closed down for this outdoor theater called La Machine, which really, you know, opened the minds to what events could happen in an area like the Byward Market. So we're all for events, we're all for animation, and we're all for supporting a diverse business mix in an area like Rideau Street, like the Byward Market. Rideau Street as its kind of last challenge, where the LRT is finally open, and now Rideau Centre is expanded, and we're finishing up Rideau Street between Dal and Sussex, and that should have a different look by the fall.
Yeah, and it's a perfect time to really close that street and work more on it right now, given the current circumstances.
Yeah, I know for sure. It just happened that way, frankly, but it's easier for the contractor to work in a closed environment anyhow. So it gave us the window to close it down, get their work done, and then when people are going to go back to some form of normal in the fall, they'll see a brand new Main Street. Rideau Street is Ottawa's Main Street. It hasn't lived to that standards for the last 30 years, but before that it had, and it's called to be there. It's on the edge of the Byward Market. It connects the east and west of town. There's now the density of commercial real estate and retail that's needed. And there's more and more residents that live along that corridor. And there's great transit access with the LRT. So it has all of that potential. It just needs to thrive on it.
I'm really excited to see the future of it. Like,
Yeah,
you only see so much potential down there, and there's just so much it can go up with.
for sure.
So one of the things I also want to talk about is I kind of want to hear about your journey and how you got to the position that you're in. So you went to University of Ottawa, and what was the work experience from there? Because you have a I got a chance to look at your about page on the Ottawa thing, and you have a long list of stuff that you work with.
Yeah, so I grew up in the community. I'm a sport guy. I mean, I used to play a lot of sports, swimming, hockey, baseball. When I was a kid, I got to know a lot of folks that way, and then I turned around and volunteered back as a coach, and worked for the city in aquatics for about 10 years to pay for university. And
Yeah,
then
I do the same actually.
yeah, no, it's great.
Yeah.
They were good jobs. They were regular jobs, and brought in the money that I needed to pay for it. And then what really opened my mind, there's two opportunities that came about. One was I went to work for Tim Hortons Foundation camps, And that gave me an opportunity to work with very vulnerable youth. And it allowed me as an individual to really get my roots in, right? I became very comfortable with myself. I was confident, and I knew what I knew I could speak up and be that voice for marginalized groups. And then, when I did my master's, it was right before the Olympic Games in Vancouver. And like many co-op programs at the university, sometimes people go and work in my environment for national sport bodies and so on. And I just strive for the top. I went to work for the minister's office right before the Olympic Games in Vancouver. And that opened up my mind to the politics of it. I'm not a partisan person per se, but I could see that I was no different from the minister. So then when the Olympic Games finished, my master's was completed. I basically turned around and knocked on 22,000 doors at the time, twice, and then beat an incumbent that had been in office for 30 years. So, there's no magic stick. I knew my community. I worked hard at it and built confidence every door I knocked. Or, there's not.
What year was this again?
That was in 2010.
2010.
Yeah, that was in. I graduated. I worked for the minister. The Olympics were done. And there was an election that fall.
And then you just went door to door and just campaigned.
That's I guess it was really easy because a lot of folks knew me from the sport world. I mean, the sport community is really tight, right?
Oh yeah.
I had basically any lifeguard that became a lifeguard during a short window of time at the city had to go through me because I was an examiner or a teacher. So I knew that group. I had taught a lot of swimming over the last 10 years. So a lot of parents knew me from local pools. I'd coached hockey. So anyone that had a kid in sports somewhere knew me. So that was a really good base. And then there was an appetite for change, right? So, every election since, there was an election in 2018, there was an election in 2014. I've had the same model of knocking on every door, which obviously gets me in front of every resident, but also validates some of the projects I'm working on.
And it personalizes you. Like, that's the thing. Like, when you actually, a lot of the time you see the signs, but you never actually meet the person. Yeah. And for somebody who's maybe not more passionate about politics, it really gives them an opportunity to say, okay, well, this person actually came to my door and talked to me. And it really increases, your brand reputation, which is critical.
Yeah, and people are really focused on, especially these days, it's what's happening in the States with Trump, or, even they'll be really partisan around federal politics. And I always say to people, that's the sexy and that's what people like or hate, right? But at the local level, it's way different, right? Like when we're investing in a park, or when we're struggling with housing, or when, most recently with COVID, when our seniors couldn't get to grocery stores, that's the real politics, right? That's where you're making a difference, not for a press release or not for a photo op, but you're really feeling like you're supporting the community. And that's why I'm in this. A lot of people will say, well, look, you've been in local politics for 10 years. What's next for you? And it's hard, right? Because, I could keep doing what I'm doing. I could take a run for the mayor, which would just widen my umbrella to a citywide. But certainly I don't see myself going into provincial or federal politics currently, because I'm not partisan. I'm really issue focused and have a vision for areas like the market, like Rideau Street, like some investments and some strategies around housing, or some of the issues around transit, or, youth. But it's hard for me to fit in those parties that really have what I call, each party has a good and a bad side. So it's hard for me to say, and too often, if you speak to a student that's in poli sci, they'll be excited about that. But the general public really don't really care about parties. They've unfortunately maybe fit into a party by the nature of their parents or a particular issue. And that's sort of the downfalls of the party politics environment.
I'm a marketing major. That's what I'm in by nature. And I got some chance to take some communication courses. And I got a chance to take communication in Canada. And one of the most interesting things that I found, and you just briefly touched on it, and it's not super important, but we're so hyper-focused on the United States environment that we forget to look around us and see what issues are pressing on us. And that's not to discount any of the issues going on in the States or even in our own country. It's just we too many times forget how impactful our local community has in our day-to-day life. And so,
yeah, you know what's interesting in what you're describing is you look at Europe, each country has its own identity, right? From Italy to Portugal to France, the UK. They're co-influenced by being in the European Union, yet they have their own identity. And by the nature of our location, we have probably the largest intercountry border in the world with the States. We're very influenced by them. We have an aging population, which means there's a lot of snowbirds that go down to the States in the summer. But yet, like, there's a lot of great things in Canada, and we should continue to develop what we're all about and be less influenced. I see professional sports as kind of like merging us all in one group in the worst of ways, right? Like when the Raptors do well or when the Jays do well, it's a Canada thing. It's not a US thing. So, that's a struggle of ours of, continuing to build our own brand and showcasing what we have to offer and being proud of that and being also honest about some of the challenges we have around our small communities in rural Canada, right? That are going to continue to struggle when the majority of population live in large city centers now.
mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I come from a very diverse background in terms of where I've lived. So I grew up in Nova Scotia. I started my university in Vancouver, and now I live in Ottawa. So I've been to every province through swimming. And you just get an opportunity to see how different every place in Canada really is.
Yeah.
And coming from Nova Scotia, which Halifax is going through tremendous growth, but the rest of the province is it's hurting. It's like you said, because everyone's migrating to these big cities, the small communities are getting hit the hardest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's going to continue to happen. And, it's a challenge. How do you ensure a proper transition? Is there ways to support those economies? I find it's getting really expensive to do that, right? So getting, for example, internet into those rural communities while their population is declining, it's like they're tough public policy discussions ahead of us, thinking about some of the environmental issues we have and how that affects our rural communities as well. Yet we have to support our farms because they feed the large cities, right? So it's conflicting. I wouldn't want to be in those positions. Ottawa sort of faces that, right? We forget that 80% of Ottawa is rural. And that means we have a lot of large agricultural land. We're the size of five large big Canadian cities, Montreal, Vancouver, Toronto, and Edmonton, in land space combined, and we still have 100 square kilometers. So, and we're only 1 million in population. So we face what some of our small rural partners have in a different way, right? We have to protect our agricultural land. We have to support our rural economy. And it's easier in our large city center. I could see in rural Nova Scotia how that could be an even bigger challenge.
Yeah, well, I mean, to what you said, it's really interesting because not a lot of people recognized how big Ottawa is land size. Like what areas are actually included. Like I'm out in Canada right now, but when I'm in Sandy Hill, like they're two different areas, and even like
I almost feel like in different cities, but it's I mean, Canada is not far. That's nothing. But when you think of a Constance Bay or a Vars or Bearbrook area, like that shows you how far we are. And that's just the east-west, like south. I have a colleague that represents one of the rural communities, Manatik, and where he lives, he's closer to the American border than he is to drive to City Hall.
Actually,
that just shows you how large we are and how we face challenges, right? Ogdensburg, I believe, is the closest border front for him. And it just shows you when I talk about cycling infrastructure or transit downtown for his residents that, they don't have sidewalks. They they feel very disconnected from a Rideau Street or a Sandy Hill, for example, unless their family, they have family members that that work downtown or that go to the University of Ottawa. And in some ways, that's the biggest challenge we have. In other ways, it's the tremendous opportunity that we have as a community to offer that sort of lifestyle, right? You can live in rural Ottawa yet take benefit from the big city amenities.
That's so diverse to think about it that way. Like there's certain things I just never get a chance to really dive deeper into. How do you even manage that when like you have two communities with such diverse needs, but yet they're technically under the same umbrella?
Well, it starts with a place of understanding, right? Like if you understand what each other has in terms of to offer or in terms of challenges, then it's much easier to tie in public policies that that impact them. We're going to see Ottawa transform in that respect, right? When I know people think LRT and they might have a very positive, very negative view of it, but when phase 2 fully opens, which will be in 2-3 years, you're going to see some of the suburban communities of Ottawa, which were basically in no man's land, right? They were not rural, but they weren't urban, and they were struggling with that kind of a tie-in. You'll be able to basically be at the extreme of Orleans at Trim Road and sit on an LRT and be in the Byward Market in less than 10 minutes.
That's
That's changing, right? So you think of, well, how does that impact a rural community? And it does, because you could then live in Vars, drive your car to that nearest LRT station at Trim, jump in and be in the Byward Market in 20 minutes, while the Byward Market for you as a local business would never have been never been kind of a regular Friday spot in a traditional rural sense. So and you think about it from a tourist point of view, you'll come to our airport and be right into the core in 10 minutes on LRT.
mm-hmm.
That is a $40 plus taxi ride now into the core. So that's the experience we had to offer that we have to offer currently, that will be transformed in a few years.
Yeah, well, it changes tourism immensely. Like even just rural living, like you look at Montreal, for example. It's probably not the greatest comparison, but like the accessibility on the metro means that I can rent an Airbnb outside of Montreal and still comfortably get in no issue. And you like just seeing the potential for that in Ottawa is really exciting.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting. We were talking about students and the growth of university earlier in our chat, and that's where I think, if I'm a student, I see all this potential, because I'll have a U-Pass and I'll be able to live in whatever community I want on the LRT line. Not that Sandy Hill is not going to be attractive, but if it's not affordable, or if there's a type of housing that I'm looking for, or if it's closer to work, for example, I can make those decisions. So I now am in more possession of where I want to live. I might not need a car, right? Like you have to think about all those factors for the various groups and how much time people gain. I think people forget the majority of folks in Ottawa every day are behind their car, and they're likely to be commuting morning and night more than an hour a day. That's a lot of time wasted in a week. And you're going to say, well, yeah, but now they can jump on transit. Yeah, but once you jump on transit, you can look at your phone, you can listen to music, you can read a book, you can start working. You can't do that behind the wheel.
No, not at all. Well, actually, on the topic of that, freeing up time in the COVID era, especially, I found myself enjoying the amount of more free time that I have due to this. Like, one of my biggest instances, and it may not be relatable for most people, is that, I typically I like to cook. It takes me a while to cook, and I don't like meal prepping. So for me, I've been saving money because I can be in class and cook at the same time. And just the amount of extra time that I have due to this is just immense. So I guess,
and I think the majority of residents would feel that way. To give you an insight on my life, that hasn't happened, right? Because when there is a state of emergency, usually the city hyper focuses because it's geographically located, right? Think of the Rideau sinkhole, or think of the floods or the tornadoes we've had over the last few years. but COVID has impacted every resident, every agency, every business in their city. So this declaration of state of emergency is helpful on some fronts, but for people like me and my team, we've had to plug and play, right? We had shelters that were saying, well, am I an emergency service? Yes, stay open. We had food banks that were closed that we needed to reopen. We had social services agencies. We had seniors. So now in mid-June, what it is, it's the reopening of businesses. And you might imagine all the businesses in the Byward saying, hey, can I reopen? What do I need in terms of PPE? What are the standards? What does it mean for patios? So you might imagine kind of the local granular work that we would have. So we've been, we're always busy, but we've been very different busy in this period. And I have, I'm not complaining. I love my job. I love the privilege that I have to represent this great community, but I also have a 2-year-old at home. And, I've seen the struggle for young families of working at home. Like now I'm not at home. A number of weeks in, I came to City Hall just because I need to differentiate between personal and professional life. But for most who are working from home with their family around, that could also be a massive stressor. You might have more time, but do you have more free time? That's a question to pose.
Yeah, actually, it is a really interesting one. It's like how people aren't supposed to have, offices in their bedroom or work in their bedroom because, you don't want to associate work with sleep, and then it kind of throws off your schedule. Like onto that, like because I've had so much more free time, I've done a lot more schoolwork because I'm at home, so why not? And
the future of school, university will change, right?
Oh yeah,
I think you will have a choice to live in the city you want and do the courses online you want with the institutions that are the most progressive, and that. Obviously we're talking about Ottawa, but that will challenge every university and colleges in Canada for the best way. I think education at the post-secondary level especially will be transformed through this period.
I like the post-secondary for me, like I love the school aspect of it, but from an athlete perspective, I wonder how it's going to affect sports going forward, especially in Canada. Like I know U Sports just rebranded and they're trying to gain, more viewership, but something like this can only hurt somebody going through that kind of change.
Yeah, I was in chat with the sports director at the University of Ottawa, Sue Hyland. She's amazing. Mm-hmm. And, you could just feel all the athletes that were ready to perform, and the university was, there to support them. Yet there's decisions that are made that are legitimate, but still have major impacts on people's expectation, people's ability to perform. And that's no different, right? I think that impacts everyone obviously now we're talking athletes and sports, but it would impact everyone in the same way. And universities will have to become competitive on their housing, on their amenities, on their sports. I see that as a tremendous opportunity. And Ottawa, especially Carleton, has shown to be very good at rolling with the punches, if you will. But Ottawa is a more traditional institution, really focused on research, really focused on classes. We'll need to rethink. It's huge in terms of it's the 4th largest university in the country, but their amenities are they're no better than when I was around. Yet they've doubled.
There's certain areas that definitely need some improvement.
And yet I have it stamped on my heart. So I'm saying this as a very constructive, and I see it because it can transform itself, but it really needs the right type of leaders to support that.
Yeah, I think the biggest issue is I know I haven't had the chance to read it. One of my friends got the chance to read the master plan over the next few years and the expansion over what they had planned. And the biggest issue, right now is that they're being forced to move ahead what they had planned 20 years because it's called for now. It's like I got a chance to talk with somebody from Shopify, and they were saying the same thing where it's like, they knew this was going to be the future, but they just didn't expect it to happen this fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fine to work from home. Like I have I'm good buddies with the folks that created Shopify, former Ottawa alumni at Tuffer School of Management, obviously. And, we have a small community of leaders, and I challenge those guys. It's great not to work in a space, but we're I don't know about you, but I've had 8 hours in a row of Zoom calls. Well, my brain feels dead, right? It's still
Oh
not
yeah.
the same being in person. So organizations like them will still need to create spaces and learning experience so that people feel valued. You're not just a person working behind a computer. You're part of a movement, right? And that's what Shopify has been successful on, and I'm sure they'll find their footing on this transformation.
Well, it's tough to like, introduce yourself to new people, find ways. I think one of the biggest concerns I heard Waries was like promotions, like finding how to move up in a company when you can't really build a relationship with somebody
Yeah,
or
and
gain a sense.
who's performing or not, right? That's can
Yeah.
be
Like who's actually working from home and who's just doing the bare minimum to get by and then spending the rest of the time doing something else.
yeah.
It's an interesting time. Well, I'm trying to be cognitive of the time. I know you had 30 to 40 minutes and I don't want to keep you too long.
I appreciate it. So my story is no different. It's people can public life is interesting. I think everyone has their own parcours. I've been fascinating to see, for example, last year there was a Canadian boy on the Kansas City Chiefs who's a doctor, and just seeing his Duvernay's path, I think it opens the mind. Like, I didn't study political science or communication. I'm a health science guy, and now I'm in political office. I think, our generation's certainly called to break those barriers, and we're likely not to do a career for the same career for 30 years. So that it gives us a lot of opportunities to do what we want and to challenge ourselves a bit differently.